Hey, what's up guys? This is Nicole from CreativeLast.com. Today we're going to talk about watercolor supplies, where to start, what to buy, and in the end, I'm going to save you money. Hi guys, I'm so glad you're here. This is going to be a series, and today we're just going to concentrate on talking about watercolor paper. Why am I delving so deep into this? You know, why do you need to know 140-pound paper versus 300-pound paper? What does that even mean? Obviously, I could turn the page, so it can't be that heavy, right? I mean, there's things about watercolor that's strange. Cold pressed, what? Versus hot pressed, you know, are we talking about coffee? Like, what is going on here, right? So knowledge is power, guys, and knowledge is going to help you make better choices when it comes to buying your supplies. And you know what? You're just going to punch fear in the face, because the more knowledge you have, the less intimidated you're going to be, because you're going to know it all before you even get started. The material, let's get right down to brass tacks. How is it made? Well, there are student grades that are made with wood pulp. A lot of paper that you get at Michael's, Joann's, and you know, you might not even know this, but they're all student grade paper. And the student grade paper is the worst paper to get, because it's not even real cotton. It is a wood pulp, and I think it just adds up to a lot of frustration. And you know, and people just don't want to learn, or they say, this sucks, it's way too hard. Well, working on 100% cotton versus working on a student grade, they're two different beasts. Okay, they behave completely different, and one is much more enjoyable than the other. So then you might ask yourself, well, why doesn't everybody just get cotton paper? Well, you know, it comes down to that, right? It's more expensive, but I have a way around that. If you buy watercolor sheets that are good 100% cotton in big sheets from a real art store, you can cut them down to individual sizes, and it'll save you a lot of money in the long run. It's much cheaper than getting pads and blocks. I'll talk about weight first, okay? So depending on how thin or thick your paper is, 90-pound paper, don't even bother. It's just, it sucks. It buckles like crazy. It's not going to be a fun experience. Just don't. So the most popular weight is 140-pound paper. And how did they get to the 140 pounds? Well, when the paper comes off the press, it comes off in these big sheets, okay? And they stack up 500 sheets. And then the weight of that is what you see on the front of the paper pad when you see 140-pound or 300-pound. That's how the weight is determined, because it goes by these huge sizes of like the final dimensions of these sheets, which then get, of course, cut down into smaller sheets and made into pads and blocks and what have you. 140 pounds is an all-around really great paper for beginners, and you know, if you're just doing a few layers, then it's perfect. 300-pound paper is a lot thicker. It's like twice as thick, and it's really great for multiple layers if you're doing some really intricate type of landscapes or animals where you're doing layer upon layer. It's not going to buckle as much for you. It's going to be a lot better. It is more expensive though. Let's talk about sizing now. Watercolor sizing is this material that they add to the pulp. It's like a gelatin material, and the paper is usually covered with this sizing gelatin sprayed onto the paper in the final production. This is what makes the watercolor paper able to take a water medium. It kind of makes it a little bit waterproof, so you have time to spread your paint around. I know that arches use the gelatin sizing even within the fibers itself. It's not just sprayed on top. Now we're going to go to texture. Cold press means that the rollers that it goes through, okay, are cold, and they get this texture of the rollers that they go through, and so there's like little divots in there. It's very forgiving for mistakes. Hot pressed, the rollers are hot, right? And so it becomes smooth. It's like an iron. Your paper will be completely smooth, which any little mistakes, trust me, are going to show up on a hot pressed paper. Therefore, not good for beginners. Do not get the hot pressed, okay? Start off learning with the cold press paper. Usually used for artists that do a lot of botanicals, a lot of very intricate, detailed work, okay? Hyper-realism. And the last one is rough. So rough is the roughest texture. It's more textured, of course, than the cold press. And I think it also holds more water because there's more grooves. And I think it's great for landscapes and animals. Well, I am gonna show you a few different samples that I have, and we are going to put some paint down on these samples and see how each paper behaves and see which ones come out on top. So as you see, I have 4 different samples of watercolor paper. Okay, so the first layer of color has dried, and it looks like this is probably the most pigmented. It has the more vibrancy than the other ones. These ones are pretty darn close. Okay, so as you can see, it looks like the arches is the one that is the most pigmented and the most vibrant. And we will see how these different papers do with lifting up. So this lifts up very easily, which is a good thing if you're doing a project where you're not doing too many layers and you need to lift up paint for lots of highlights. This one, not as much. Okay. That one really lifts a lot. Now you see the arches, it will lift, but it's very subtle and you have to work at it. So if you're doing a project where you're doing multiple layers, arches is great for that. So that's it as far as my paper's concerned. I would say that this is number 1. This would be number 2. Fabriano number 3. And that would be last place. Pads versus blocks. So what a pad is it comes glued to all 4 sides, okay? With a tiny section here, you can see that it's letting go. That's because I think I used a lot of water. But you would slide any kind of knife, X-Acto knife, palette knife, right here. You can see where I got my fingernail. And you would, when you're done your painting, you wait for it to dry, and then you would just cut all the way around, okay? So it comes in many different, comes in smooth, which is not gonna have any texture at all. This is the texture I recommend for beginners, okay? So it'll be the green 140 pounds, and this is cold press. Now this one is rough texture, but it is also a pad, Okay, see where you can slide your knife in, and it's glued on all sides. Okay, regular pads are just glued down on one side. Okay, so they can be ripped off, and they can be cut down for smaller projects. There's a 90-pound, which don't even bother, because after all, we're working in watercolor, and the 90-pound just buckles like crazy. So this one's also a block. This block was not glued as well as the arches. Over the summer, I started ordering a German watercolor brand, and I don't even know how to pronounce it, guys, so excuse me if I pronounce it wrong, but it is the Hahnemuhle, and this is 100% cotton, and the Cezanne, I think, is really good. This is actually a block, and it's the best block I've seen yet because this sucker is glued. Even the arches lifts up if you're using a lot of water. This does not lift up. This will really hold your paper in place. So for that reason alone, I absolutely love the Cezanne blocks. And the only thing I noticed different is it won't take a whole lot of lifting the paper. It starts to compromise the paper. I just actually got this in the mail. They gave me a sample of the Collection Series. Again, these two are just fantastic, and I would say very, very comparable to the arches. The only other paper I have found out there that's pretty comparable to arches. So those I highly recommend, even though they weren't part of the testing stage. It's just been within the last 2 months I've really played around with these papers.